and welcome to the Self-Aware Entrepreneur Show. Today I am in a slightly different location. It looks like I'm at the beach, but actually I'm at the Wellbeing farm, taking a little vacation of my own, just a few miles away from the office, but it feels like it could be anywhere in the world right now. And joining me today is an international guest, our first international guest, amazingly from Australia, the lovely country, so far away, and even better, she's from Perth, the West Coast, where everyone forgets. I even got the wrong time zone because I was so focused on all my friends who live in Sydney and Melbourne. But yeah, it's the amazing Dr. Jenny Brockis. She is, a real fountain of knowledge on neuroscience and psychology, on high performance mindsets, on creative thinking, and more importantly, on brain health, which is something that we don't tend to take seriously until it starts to impact us. And it's a massively important field that is underexplored. The awareness is not there. And more importantly, if you're going to be an entrepreneur, if you're going to be a high performer, if you're going to lead people, then your brain needs to be healthy, because it's providing every element of your energy, your clarity, and ultimately what you do. So Jenny, it's an absolute pleasure to have you with us today, and thank you for joining us in what is your evening time.
It is, and it's my absolute pleasure to be with you, Lee. I'm really looking forward to our conversation. And you're right, yes, it's definitely evening time here. I'm winding down, and you're halfway through your day, aren't you?
Yeah, we are, and ultimately it's the beauty of digital technologies that we can connect from what would be a good, 15, 16-hour flight. But we can just beam across the world to be together at the same time. And I'm incredibly grateful for you taking some time out of your evening to join me today.
My pleasure.
So, Jenny, can you tell us a little bit about yourself? I mean, like you said, you've worked in the medical and clinical field for years. You're an author. You're an expert of a number of different modalities. But tell us a little bit about yourself and what you're up to now.
Okay, so I am a qualified medical doctor. I trained in the UK. I was born in the UK, but migrated to Australia because my husband got a job over here, which is fine. And we came over for a couple of years and we just stayed. You know how it goes.
Long vacation.
And I've always probably been a little bit of a square peg in a round hole. I'm not very good at conforming. I like to question things. I like to think outside the box. So when you're operating in a very conservative environment like the medical profession, sometimes I get a little bit edgy and a bit frustrated because I see that things could be better or improved, and it's an incredibly slow-moving machine. Don't get me wrong, it has to be, because you have to make sure it's tested and valid and everything else. But I basically moved away from clinical practice. I used to be a GP, had my own group medical practice here in Perth, and moved into the well-being space because I was so fed up with sticking band-aids on people, where they were coming in to see me because they developed certain illnesses or problems in their life or in their workplace, and most of it was preventable. Yeah. And I thought we're just missing the obvious piece, which is, prevention is worth a lot more than just having the cure. I was reading an article that a friend wrote yesterday, actually, and she said it's a bit like offering people sort of world-class cardiology services for people who've had heart attacks, failing to address anything before they need that, to sort of encourage them to look after their hearts a bit better and maybe manage their diet and their weight and do some exercise and all that other stuff. So I've always been drawn to, let's get good at understanding why we do certain things the way we do, why we develop certain habits which aren't always great for us, and really just to question how we can improve things. And I'm particularly keen about making a difference in the workplace space, because for me, there's too much toxicity, there's too much expectation that people will perform at their very best, but they're not provided a safe environment in which to do so. And I'm thinking, that doesn't figure in my view. So that's my sandbox at the moment. I'm working in the workplaces with different organizations, helping them to develop better brain health, because like you said at the beginning, if you pay a bit of attention to what goes on up here, you can think better, you get more achieved, you're more collaborative, you can work better as a team member, etc., etc., etc. So I'm really focused on that, and mental well-being, because I think, we'd all know that with the pandemic, it's brought around a number of maybe unforeseen consequences, but it's certainly amplified a lot of what wasn't going well for us in our different societies beforehand. And I think the level of psychological distress that people have been experiencing is just enormous. But I want to challenge the mental health system, because again, we've always been focused on, well, let's fix what's broken. If somebody's got anxiety or depression, let's diagnose them, offer them some help and get them sorted. Of course we need to do that. But why aren't we keeping people well in the first place? Why aren't we addressing what it takes to be mentally fit?
Yeah. It's funny, isn't it?
That's my thing.
Yeah, and the beauty is that we've had a number of discussions around feeling like proactive rockets in a reactive environment. And it's challenging because we are, fueled to look at things proactively, to look really deep down into, upstream, what is going on, rather than trying to fight all the way downstream with the best.
Yes.
I mean, so often what we actually see is we're there's a lot of well-being in the space where people are doing amazing things at the very end of the life cycle, so to speak, at the very added value side. And like we so often allude to, the workplace culture is the foundation of well-being. The levels of psychological safety and belonging, the appreciation and the value, and the ability for people to, have a space to express themselves, to have a bit of autonomy, and ultimately feel like they can go out there and express themselves. And
exactly.
That's the foundation. It doesn't matter how many lovely, fancy workshops and tips that they can pick up. If you don't have some stable foundations to build on, it's like building a lovely, shiny house on the sand.
Yes.
And then just watching
on the sand. Yes. Yeah. And then watching it gradually sink because it's got no foundations.
And if there's one thing about, us, Jenny, is we kind of look at the kind of some of the clinical approaches and taking them into a business context, but making them more dynamic, making them relevant and actionable to people where they are currently at, instead of, coming in and confusing them with, high-level clinical terminology that just doesn't resonate. And also threading story into it as well, so they can actually feel a little bit of that, understanding, and feels a bit more engaging. But yeah, like we said, I mean, we've discussed this for hours, and we've only got so long today, and we're not going to take up hours of your day with this. But what I do want to say, Jenny, is can you tell us a little bit more about the journey that got you to that point? Because if there's one thing that, really brought us together, it's a shared curiosity that's endlessly asking questions.
Well, certainly it was a shared curiosity. But the chief thing that brought me to this space was that I'd set up a very successful business. I was, principal of my own group medical practice. I had a number of assistants who worked for me. I had some staff, had the most beautiful clients that, I was privileged enough to look after. And it was great. It was, that'd been my dream to have that. And I had it all. And not only that, I had a fantastic husband. I had 2 children, and who I loved to bits, and all was great, except it wasn't. Because being a little bit of an overachiever and a perfectionist, somebody who suffers from a bit of imposter syndrome, prone to anxiety. I mean, somebody said, yes, Jenny, you're a highly functioning anxious person. I thought, oh, great. I eventually pushed too hard for too long and succumbed to burnout. And burnout, as we now know, has been redefined as that triad of extreme exhaustion, cognitively, mentally, and emotionally and physically. It's that sense of negativity, cynicism, and knowing that your performance is far lower than it could be. when it happened because I had chosen to deliberately ignore the warning signs. Because, you know, when you're a busy entrepreneur running a business, you expect to be busy, you expect things to challenge you, you expect to have some things that go wrong, and you just suck it up and you just keep on going because that's what you do. So I did, and completely overlooked the sight that I'd lost about 10 kilos in weight. I wasn't sleeping, I wasn't eating because I felt sick all the time. I was having panic attacks, and being a doctor, I understood what a panic attack was. And I remember completely dissociating from when they happened, thinking, oh, Jenny, you're having another panic attack. Oh, it's okay, it won't kill you. So I was able to rationalize what was happening to me, and yet didn't actually join the dots to think, hang on a minute, this is actually an indication that things are not all right. And I basically collapsed in a practitioner's room. I'd gone to seek attention for my chronic neck and shoulder pain, which I'd had for months. I wonder where that had come from. And I picked myself up, having sort of come round, went home, and never stepped foot inside my general practice again after that day. Wow. It took me a year to recover to the level where I felt capable of actually doing something useful again. So it takes a long time to recover from those type of events. And looking back on it, I wouldn't wish it on my worst enemy, but it taught me a lot about myself, about what had led me to be in that position, and really gave me the impetus to want to do something different to protect other people from experiencing something like that. Because often burnout is associated with symptoms of anxiety or depression or both, as well as the odd panic attack, of course. So it was really taking a different view and a different approach. And I knew that I wouldn't be going back into general practice, because it was as if I'd sort of had that T-shirt, worn it for a while, it was time to move on. And it actually gave me the opportunity to re-evaluate how I wanted to not only live my life, but to devise a new way of working. So I created my own new career path. I didn't know anybody else who did what I did, and just set forth, not knowing where I would go. But, 10, 11 years on, it's been great, because I'm learning more all the time. We've got so much new information from the neuroscience, the behavioral science, the positive psychology, which gives us that credibility. We've got that scientific backup to know what actually is important, what actually works, and to recognize that it's not a one size fits all. It's about working out what works for a particular person. And that's the beauty of it.
And that individual approach is so important. And what I just want to ask you, Jenny, is, you've been there as a high-performing individual who's continually overachieved, who's hit, heights of success, who's probably got quite a competitive streak in them. And ultimately is driven by making a difference. I think quite often those people tend to be overlooked because they're hitting those numbers. They seem to be hitting those milestones. And how often do employers check in on those people, the ones who, seem to be doing everything, seem to be over-delivering? And how often do we check on those for the challenges? Because we kind of live in a world where mental health is quite, closely interlinked with mental illness, which then makes us almost kind of think, well, if someone's lacking in performance, let's check in
on them.
Let's check in on them. And the more likely to ask those questions and identify trends, which is important, because usually they are symptomatic of, bigger challenges that person is facing. But I do find a little bit of a trend of those who over-deliver, those who overachieve, those who push on and, really make a success of their careers, never being checked in on. And
no, that's right. Because we can be relied on to deliver. So people have that sense of, well, it's okay, we can leave them be. It's only if somebody's astute enough to notice that there's been a little bit of a change, and to ask the right sort of open-ended questions, to see what might be going on, that you can then have that conversation to find out what is really happening in somebody's life. Because let's face it, we're encouraged to park our life at the door when we go to work.
Yeah.
But the reality is it doesn't work like that.
No. Well, it gets rather heavy carrying that mask every day.
It does.
The ability to bring our whole human to work is again something that we both speak about, and we're both incredibly passionate about, because if you look at the challenges of trying to either decouple yourself as you enter a workplace, or to kind of carry a fake persona that gets increasingly heavy as you try to continue to cultivate it every day. It just ultimately, that provides a challenge that gradually impacts on people's mental and emotional well-being over time.
Absolutely.
And I think there's another thing that I kind of just want to bring up, Jenny, is in from yourself having that fusion of kind of business acumen with clinical medical knowledge and expertise. That's a really powerful way to kind of get a message out there and be able to see how businesses can utilize well-being and help innovation and advancement as a way to advance the impact and the performance that they make. But what I want to do is reflect that back a little bit, and being someone with a lot of grounding medically in a medical profession and running a practice, how challenging was it to be able to turn that mirror around and look at the symptoms that you were facing, and admit that you weren't able to fix them immediately and had to look a bit deeper?
It was extremely challenging because, like you've just suggested, I had got very good at putting on my professional mask every day and going off to work and doing what I did and doing what I loved doing. It wasn't until it sort of hit me smack between the eyes, and the other thing that I noticed was I'd fallen out of love with my work. That was probably the worst aspect of it. Instead of something that I really looked forward to every single day, I then was dreading the drive to work. I was dreading having to interact with people, whether they were a client or a colleague. I was becoming more and more inward looking, and basically just refusing to accept that something wasn't right. So it is hard. And I then, having had to acknowledge, because I wasn't capable of doing anything else, that I was no longer fit for work, and having to step back and let go of my business, I also had to step into the space of becoming a patient myself. Because I knew that it was going to take more than just taking time off to recover. I had to seek professional help. And of course, being very self-directed and autonomous and not wanting to ask anybody for anything because I can do it my way, was very difficult. But I was extremely grateful I had lots of support from family, my husband, my friends, those who I shared, because that's the other thing. When something like this goes wrong, I certainly felt ashamed. I felt a lot of guilt. I felt I'd let lots of people down. And when you're dealing with those negative emotions, it's very hard to put yourself in that positive space of, well, let's get this sorted and get back to the road to recovery. But the other thing was I had a fantastic psychologist who made such a difference. We had many interesting conversations over the weeks and the months, but it was his insights that helped me to gain the insights I needed to understand myself. And it was when he asked me, and how did you contribute to what happened, Jenny? It was like, oh, what do you mean? It all happened to me. And he said, no. So it's very interesting. So asking for help, it's difficult. It's really difficult. And I think, we often say, oh, people have just got to put their hand up and ask for help. Unless you've ever been in that situation, you have no idea just how hard it is to actually do that.
And can you just share? Oh, yeah. I can fully appreciate that. And it's not easy. And it's like a role transition from practitioner to patient. And you've got to flip that complete relationship that, again, is not only part of who you are and your identity, but big part of that mask that you put on every day to become the practitioner. What I want to explore is that when we talk about burnout, there's a medical definition now that really starts to expand people's understanding. But a lot of people see it and still confuse it with chronic stress. And quite often think about burnout in terms of a certain level of physical or mental fatigue. I just want you to, just explore a little bit the elements around becoming cynical about the life around us, starting to detach from areas of life, and that almost feeling that nothing has value. And just tell us a little bit about how that felt and how that kind of looks externally.
Oh, that's quite a big question, Lee. Okay. So with the cynicism, I realized that because I didn't want to be there anymore, I just wanted to be anywhere else except in the surgery at work. I really sort of lost any empathy for those who had hurt themselves or were unwell. And so I created this sort of distance between myself and them. I became very mechanical, transactional in what I was doing. It didn't mean that I couldn't do my job, but I wasn't doing it very well. And I'm sure some of my clients would have noticed the change over that period of time. The negativity was like, what's the point of doing this? There is no point. I didn't want to be there, but I didn't want to be anywhere else really either. And at my very lowest point, I was starting to think that my family, my husband would be better off without me. And I wasn't scared by those thoughts, but they were becoming a bit loud, a bit more frequent. And of course, fortunately, I guess, it then sort of coincided with when I actually physically collapsed in the practitioner's office. So then I got sorted out properly. But there's a huge difference between the amount of stress and fatigue that I think many of us are experiencing on a daily basis. I hear people talking about the fact, I'm burning out because I'm just so tired all the time, forgetting that we're living in a time of a global pandemic. We are going to be absolutely exhausted. There are going to be days where it's going to be difficult to climb out of bed and crawl across the floor to get into the bathroom and have a shower. That is not quite the same as burnout, because burnout is the result of chronic unmitigated stress over a long period of time. Whereas the other sort of symptoms are sort of wax and wane. We have some days, some weeks which are worse than others, but then overall it sort of sorts itself out, and we have the other times where we feel, I'm managing a bit better at the moment, and that's okay.
I think that's one of the clear things, but it does manifest itself occasionally a little bit differently in different people as well.
Yes.
Just take a quick moment to say hi to Sam, coming in from the US.
Sam, hello.
So we've got a fully global audience, but Dr. Rebecca, a good friend of mine, has just popped a little comment in the box about clinicians having to housekeep after every case, and that kind of equates to just keep popping the mask back on. And you resonate with that feeling?
It is very much like that. That's a very good analogy. And certainly as a GP, because you'd see somebody and they'd have whatever they'd come to see you about, and then you'd see them out and say goodbye, see you next time, whatever. And then you'd immediately call the next person in and you deal with them. And you do the same thing over and over and over and over, because every time you go out, the waiting room is still full. It's like the never-ending porridge pot. You can never get to the bottom of the pot because there's always more people waiting to be seen. And you think, I needed to go to the bathroom about 3 hours ago, but there's no hope of that. and when your morning surgery has run late, and you've got your afternoon surgery already happening, and the thought of lunch was just a wishful thinking, it's very easy not to allow yourself the breaks. And I think one of the biggest things I think we could do for ourselves, especially at the current time, is to remember the power of the pause. Just whether it's a breath or 3, or literally shutting that door. I've noticed my GP does this, actually. I noticed she shuts her door for just a minute or two, obviously gathering her thoughts, making her notes, and then she comes out to ask the next person in. And I'm thinking, smart person. Smart. Because if we've got back-to-back Zoom calls all day, and I meet so many people who tell me, I've just had the day from hell, because it was literally 7 or 8 hours of just incessant screen time with one meeting after the other and no breaks in between. How can you possibly expect your brain to function in a normal way? I mean, after the second meeting, it's like, where's the coffee? And yet the expectation is often there in many workplaces. I think we've got to remember we're human, and we actually do much better when we have regular little pauses across the day to follow our, as they call it, the ultradian rhythm.
There we go. Yes. So, I love the ultradian rhythms, and I love the idea of working in waves.
Yes.
Being on and off, and being able to reconnect deeply to the work that we're doing. So that, again, is something that, from a brain health perspective as well, is absolutely massive. And can you give us just a few things that you've learned on your kind of neuroscience and brain health journey that would be really valuable to those on the call today?
I think one of the biggest ahas for myself was the importance of getting outside on a regular basis. Now, I know in the UK it rains a fair bit. Mm-hmm. Not the only reason we moved to Australia, but but it's been well documented that especially as urbanites, we probably spend 90% of our day indoors. Yeah. And we use cars or other means of transport to go to and from work unless we're working from home. And it was research from the University of Exeter, I believe, which revealed that we all need that 120 minutes per week, 17 minutes and so many seconds per day of being outside, preferably in a green space. So a few bushes or trees would be great, or a blue space if you've got a pond or a lake nearby.
Blue space behind.
Sorry?
Blue space
or
behind.
Or virtual background.
Yes.
Because that makes a huge difference. And I know myself during the lockdown last year, being able to get out just for that short walk every day, taking the dog, was my lifesaver, my absolute lifesaver. Doing that was so important to my physical and mental well-being. And the other thing is social connection. Yeah. We underestimate just how important our relationships are with other people, whether they're home-based or intimate relationships, your friends or work colleagues. And again, we've had so much self-isolation and quarantine and all this others, and do not touch, and or you're standing too close, forgetting that we're social beings, and it actually causes us social pain, which feels physically really horrible. So I certainly felt it myself. I was unable to sort of feel or touch my children because they're grown up and they live away from home. So just not being able to have that level of physical touch and connection was devastating. And I'm thinking, how many other people are feeling like this? And what was one of the silver linings, I think, for many people was to understand that, friendships and relationships are the all-important thing to our health and happiness. We know that we are much healthier when we've got people that we can count on, that we know are like us and we care about them as well. So I think, those are probably the really important things, apart from all the lifestyle stuff that we know about, but we're pretty rubbish at, how we eat, how much physical activity we get, how much sleep, good quality uninterrupted sleep we get every night as well. Yeah. But it's more than that as well. It's the things that give us joy. Yeah. Doing something for fun. Yeah. What do you do for fun, Lee? What's your fun thing?
Well, I like playing with my children. They're 8 and 6. Now that is always going to be fun, and I do like getting out into nature. And again, I'd always suggest everyone to go and take a little bit more of a look at the Environmental Centre for Human Health. and that's the group down next to with Professor Wright, and they've done some great research on, the benefits of being near the sea, the benefits of being in green environments, and it's really interesting work that they're continuing to do through this period. But as we come to the end of the show now, Jenny, can you tell us a little bit more about anything you're currently writing, any courses that are coming, and what's the next project for you?
Well, my latest book is called Thriving Mind, and that's all about how we can thrive in adversity, which is probably appropriate for right now. I've also run some programs, again, about how to thrive, how to produce sustainable high performance, raising resilience through mental well-being rather than focusing on mental health, and also understanding a bit more about our noggin, what goes on in there to help us make better decisions and be better problem solvers and things like that. So I've got a website, which is basically my name. And if anybody wants to reach out and contact me, please do. I love connecting with people around the world. It's one of my joys. And if you've got any other points to raise with me, please do. Please ask.
Yeah, so go ahead, and I'll tell you, once you get into Jenny's work, you'll be kind of sucked into a world of interest. But it's all delivered in such an actionable way, which is such a big thing when it's when you're not clinically trained, when you're not from a medical background. Just having the ability to decode some of these latest cutting edge studies into something that actually just puts it down in a nice, simple, digestible format. So I'd heartily recommend you go and explore Jenny's work a little bit more. And as we've come towards the end of the show, and I thank you all for tuning in today. It's absolutely great that you spent this Monday afternoon or Monday evening, or for Sam, Monday morning with us. And that's the beauty of being able to, being live in the middle of the day here, because we get people from all different time zones, and it's an absolute pleasure to spend that time with you, no matter whether you're eating your breakfast or having supper in the evening. So we'll be back again with another show at 12:30 UK time on Monday, where we have my good friend Michael joining us. We're going to look at the behavioural psychology of wellbeing products and really look at how we can find ways to bring things that are not digital into our world to give us environmental cues to look after ourselves. And that, in its own way, is going to, again, dig into his own entrepreneurial journey, some of the challenges that he's had, and what has made him design a product that is looking to, make a difference to the well-being of the world. But once again, Jenny, an absolute pleasure. Thank you for joining us, and we will see you again soon.
Thank you so much for having me. All the best.